Have you ever considered a rent-to-own transaction? Tune in to Tom's Take right now. One of the biggest questions that we get asked by buyers and sometimes sellers is about lease purchases or rent-to-own options on properties. And the reason people ask about them is because they don't know the facts. They don't know what actually is included in those sort of arrangements and what those agreements look like. So I'm going to walk you through what that means and maybe some of the pros and cons if you're thinking about doing that as a buyer or as a seller. So how does the rent-to-own process work? And there's really going to be two different types of agreements. The first is the lease option agreement, and the second is the lease purchase agreement. And the tough thing about all this is that there is no standard contract for these sort of transactions. It's not, hey, fill in your standard agreement of sale in Pennsylvania, or this is what we always do in the state of California when someone buys or sells a home. They don't exist. So that creates a lot of confusion here, and it's really important to understand what it all means. So typically with the rent-to-own process, there's a purchase price that's agreed to. It says how and when the purchase price is decided. So it could be at the time of signing. It could be down the line when you actually execute the sale contract. So there's a lot of variables there. And you'll see there's a lot of these variables can create confusion and sometimes not benefit the parties involved. It's not a sure thing or a certainty. There'll be rent payments. And as part of the contract, the rent that the buyer/tenant pays is going to be higher than what it would normally be because a certain percentage of that goes towards the purchase price. And again, this isn't always the case. These are just general terms and what we've seen in the past. Maintenance, this is something where the buyer could be responsible for maintaining the property. It's not all going to be on the owner because they have a vested interest in purchasing the home. Then there's option money. So the reason option money is important is that it's a non-refundable deposit. Because there's two types, the lease option and the lease purchase. The lease option is, hey, I have an option I may exercise later to buy the home. You see this in a lot of commercial transactions when they're leasing a commercial property. Not so much in residential real estate. The lease purchase, you're locked into buying. So the option money is typically your non-refundable deposit. Kind of like deposit money when you buy a home, only there's a higher likelihood the seller could retain that if you don't exercise the purchase and move forward. Then there's going to be the lease term, how long the property's getting leased before the home gets purchased, and obviously the closing process, and that'll include inspections, financing, all those sort of things. So you can see it's not as clear-cut as a normal purchase. And what that means for buyers and sellers, there's a couple cons here for each of them. Specifically, the cons for a buyer are the market may go down and you agreed to a higher sale price. You're going to lose money and pay higher rent, which is more than you wanted to spend in the first place, or you could lose your option money. So the cons for a seller are kind of the same thing. You might sell the home below market when you actually execute the contract. You may have to deal with damage and maintenance if the tenant doesn't buy the home, and then you got to go in and re-rent it or sell it again. So there's a lot of negatives here that could happen, which tells me this is why these things are not common, because there's not a clear benefit to the buyer or the seller. The contracts need to be written by an attorney in most cases, and if you're thinking about doing this, you want to talk to an agent. More importantly, talk to an attorney and get a template of how the agreement's going to work, because these are not standard agreements in Pennsylvania. It's not something a realtor could just say, hey, here's the PAR, Pennsylvania Association of Realtors contract. This is a question we get a lot. A lot of people don't realize the repercussions because you're spending more money on rent if you're a tenant or a buyer. You got that non-refundable fee, and the price you buy it for or you lock in, depending on how you do that, may be below or above market. Maybe you're having to agree to a higher sale price down the road based on appreciation. Maybe you're getting a number and the market turns. So there's not really a lot of benefits here for either party. I find them to be hard to execute, and rarely do they actually get consummated. So this is your kind of Lease Purchase 101 video. You got any questions about this, you want to know more, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, we'll be back next week.